Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice game between Vasily Ivanchuk and Manuel Petrosyan. It's a game from the round 8 of the Sunway Sitges tournament. You know that very nice place that's being played here. The one with the photo too big to be shown in its entirety, so I have to use my special dragging effects to show it. There you have it, for those of you who might have missed. A game from round 1 of the Sunway Sitges tournament where where Ivanchuk had a pretty rough start to the tournament. He lost that very nice brilliancy. But now we have a completely different game. It's a really weird game, but it's a weird for different reasons. But before we start to enjoy this game, like I said, I really hope you're having a wonderful Saturday. And here we have a very nice image that was sent to me via email by Mr. Sander, an excellent subscriber, who made this. It's basically Bobby Fischer, who is Santa Claus. I'm the elf behind him, the little helper. And Meadow is obviously the reindeer that, pulls the sleigh. So thank you for that. It's quite the imagination, very vivid. I really like it. So thank you for that. And now let's check out this very nice game. So Ivanchuk has the white pieces, and we already have, not your everyday opening. E4, C6, the Caro-Kann, D4, D5, and now F3, the Marozzi variation of the Caro-Kann. Most likely, Ivanchuk wants to take his young adversary out of book as soon as possible. So already on move 3, maybe I forgot to mention, Manuel Petrosyan is a 20-year-old Armenian grandmaster who in 2016 won the Under-18 World Youth Championship. So basically, he is a world champion. And taking on Vasily Ivanchuk can always be really a wonderful journey. You never know what to expect. You can... like in round 1, where Ivanchuk will lose in 25 moves, but sometimes Ivanchuk will beat Magnus Carlsen twice in one tournament, so you never really know what you're getting here. But okay, E6, gaining further control of the D5 square. We have knight to C3 and now bishop to B4, pinning the knight on C3. Bishop to F4, and this was all played before. This is all pretty much standard theory. Knight to F6 and now queen to D3, further protecting D4 pawn, but also preparing to castle queenside. We have B6, castling queenside, bishop to A6 attacking the queen, queen to E3, and now bishop captures on F1. Rook captures on F1, and now we have castles. Knight G to E2, of course you do have to keep on developing. The knight is also protected here, so if bishop captures, you can even capture with the knight. And here we have c5. Black now feels very competent in his development, and he attacks Ivanchuk's center. And it's very interesting, this exact same position was reached once in 2005 between, with the white pieces, there was Eric Soreng, who was an unrated player back then. So it's interesting that Vasily Ivanchuk, who was once the number 2 rated player in the world, and also even today he's a top rated grandmaster, finds himself in a position like this that was already played by an unrated player. But okay, in that game G4 was played and Black won that game, but here Vasily goes for E captures on D5. And already we have a lot of interesting development. We have bishop captures on C3, knight captures on C3, knight captures on D5, and already we have... maybe not a critical, but a very important moment in the game. Here, it seems like you have to capture. For example, if you play knight captures here, you get queen captures, and now to prevent losing this pawn, because the a2 pawn is also under attack, you would have to give up the a2 pawn. First you will capture here, then after black captures the a2 pawn, you will go queen to a3, not allow any checks. And then black will either trade queens, but most likely go back. Let's say queen to c4, bishop to e3, defending the c5 pawn. And the game continues, but black's position will be better. Ivanchuk doesn't like this, so instead of going knight captures on d5, Ivanchuk plays queen to e4. And it seems like a very nice idea. The knight cannot capture because the rook on a8 is hanging. And here... the young grandmaster Manuel Petrosyan believed Ivanchuk that it is impossible to play knight captures on c3 and play knight to c6. But knight captures on c3 was in fact the best move. You cannot capture the rook here because of knight to e2 check, and you lose the bishop as well. king moves, knight captures on f4, and now you will have two knights for a rook. Black will have a winning, a winning game here. And on the other hand, after knight captures on c3, since you can't capture the rook, you could play b captures on c3. This would be best, but then comes knight to d7. The rook is protected, the c5 pawn is protected, and black is just having a better game. So this was the correct way to go. But okay, we have queen to e4, and now knight to c6, as we've said. D captures on c5 by Ivanchuk. Now comes knight captures on c3. You cannot capture here because of the same idea. Knight to e2 check picks up the bishop, so you have to capture the knight. B captures on c3, and now we have queen to f6, offering the c6 knight for the bishop on f4. Of course, the bishop on f4 is a much more valuable piece, so first king to b2, protecting the c3 pawn, but also the king will be much safer there. And now comes b captures on c5, and when you look at this position, the queen eyeing the king there on b2, the knight is very dangerously placed. Perhaps the rook can come to b8, maybe even with a sacrifice, but Ivanchuk says no, not really, and he plays rook to b1. And now, even with Ivanchuk's awkward position of the king on b2, you can see that it's actually Ivanchuk who controls the b file, and well, his position is not all that bad. So okay, rook 8 to d8. Going for check here doesn't really do anything. So first rook 8 to d8, and now comes rook h to d1. Challenging the rook on the open d file, and now comes rook to d5. And here Ivanchuk has a choice. He can either trade down or continue playing in a different fashion. If you go rook captures on d5, you go into this forced line. E captures on d5, queen captures on f4, queen captures on c6, and now rook to b8 check. And now after king to a1, you will either have to go back with the rook, because if you trade, then you get king captures, you have some back rank weaknesses, you have to fix those, g6, g3, and you can see that white will have a better game. He's up a pawn, and well, you know, being up a pawn in a queen's endgame usually is a pretty huge advantage, so it's hard to say if this would be winning for white, but Ivanchuk would definitely have good chances. But as you don't have to trade the final rook, it's hard to say that white would actually have winning chances. So after rook to d5, Ivanchuk tries to complicate things. We have rook to d3, and now comes rook captures on d3, c captures on d3, and now knight to b4, pressuring the d3 pawn as the c3 pawn is pinned. The queen is pinning it from f6. Bishop back to d2, not allowing bishop here to stay at target, and now comes rook to d8. Now again putting pressure on this pawn, and now comes d4. Now with d4 being played, the c3 pawn is no longer pinned, so c captures on b4 is now a threat. And here Petrosyan could go back knight to d5, but he doesn't. Here he plays h6, makes some breathing room for the king, reducing the back rank weaknesses, and Ivanchuk goes for it. We have c captures on b4. So Petrosyan sacrifices a piece, but what's the compensation? Well, of course, rook captures on d4. And if you look at this position, it seems okay, the queen is under attack. You have to move the queen. Once you make a move, I'm gonna make some sort of a nasty discovery, and well, white will be lost, of course. And here it's interesting what Ivanchuk planned. We have queen to a8 check, and now black has to make a move. So now if you put yourself in young Petrosyan's shoes here, he's playing up against Vasily Ivanchuk, and you might think, why would he allow rook to d8 with a discovered check? So let's see what happens here. Rook to d8, now discovering a check against the white king, but also attacking the queen. So here Ivanchuk had bishop to c3 in mind, and now after queen captures on c3 with check, king captures, pawn captures on b4 with check, rook captures, now you pick up the queen, and you are left with this position where white is up a pawn, and well, however you put it, you can always at least have a draw. But for some reason, Petrosyan did not like this. He didn't go for this rook to d8 blocking check and delivering a discovery check, but rather he played king to h7. And here Ivanchuk immediately ran away with the king. King to c1, and now there are no more discoveries here. But queen to g6, a very precise move, preparing, well, there are some threats like rook captures here and then picking up the rook on b1, but a greater threat is simply rook c4 check and picking up the rook on b1. So Ivanchuk prevents it. We have rook to b2. Now there is no threat of actually picking up the rook on b1, but also here we have a completely critical moment where black sacrificed material. He's down a piece and he has to make it count. So here Petrosyan played queen captures on g2, which is a mistake. It doesn't allow black to go for anything anymore, but there was one more move that allowed black to push for the win. So feel free to pause the video. You are at home having a very nice Saturday. If you are like me, you know, not going out, just, you know, staying at home. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the well, let's say the winning idea for black. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. You are truly an excellent player, as both the young grandmaster from Armenia, Emmanuel Petrosyan, and the great Vasily Ivanchuk have missed this. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, the move is rook to c4 check. Now, what happens here? Obviously, you cannot block check due to queen to c2 checkmate. But what else can you do? You can't go to b1. The queen is covering b1. You have to go king d1, and now comes queen captures on g2. Most likely, both of them saw this, but it's very hard to figure out what happens next. The problem is, if you allow queen captures on f3 in any variation, then black is winning. For example, you want to bring the queen into the game, maybe bring more defense to the bishop here. Then if you allow queen captures on f3, you're getting checkmated. King has to move, then rook check here, bishop blocks, captures, and queen captures. This will be checkmate. But the really cool stuff happens if you don't move the queen after this queen captures on g2. Let's say you go bishop to c3. Now you open a discovered attack against the black queen. You get queen to f1 check, king moves, now comes rook to f4, again threatening to capture on f3. Queen to f8, now white threatens checkmate on g7, f6 blocking checkmate, and now queen captures on c5. The queen now joins the defense. Rook to f5 attacking the queen has to move with queen here, and now comes rook to d5 check as the pawn from e6 is guarding the rook. And now, well, you will either move, let's say king c2, and then queen to d1 delivers checkmate, as the king cannot go to b2 or c3, or if the king goes perhaps to e3, then you get rook to d3 check, king to f4, and now queen to c1 check. King has to go to g3. And now you can either recapture on c3, but you can also just improve the position. You can go f5, prepare f4, as the queen is also controlling f4, and there really is no way for white to escape death here. Black will either checkmate the white king. Black can always recapture this extra piece. For example, if you try to defend it, then queen g1 leads to checkmate. King h3, and now, of course, you can all see mate in 1. It's a very nice checkmate. Queen g4, as the f3 pawn is pinned, the rook is pinning it, so this would be a very nice checkmate. So a lot of possible ways to win here for black, but well, perhaps Chucky saw it and he bluffed his way out of it, but Manuel Petrosyan definitely didn't see it. So rook to c4 would have been winning here, but first he played queen captures on g2. Now similar ideas are possible here, but Ivanchuk goes rook to c2. Now rook to c4 is no longer possible, and now it's actually white that has a better position here. You don't want to allow any bishop to c3 ideas. That could be very, very dangerous. So first c captures on b4, and now comes queen captures on a7, attacking the rook on d4. Rook to d3, and now bishop captures on b4. So now Ivanchuk is up a bishop and has a passed a pawn. We have queen to f1 check, king moves, and now rook captures on f3. Petrosyan is up 2 pawns, but still 2 pawns against a piece and a passed pawn. It's not going to be easy. So this position is winning for Ivanchuk, and now it's merely a matter of technique. Queen c5, we have rook to f4, now a3, protecting the bishop on b4, queen to h1, and now comes rook to f2, offering a trade of rooks. We have E5, but Ivanchuk doesn't mind. We have captures, and now you don't want to allow F3, so the black passed pawn can keep on moving. We have queen to F5 with check. King moves, and now not recapturing the pawn, but first Ivanchuk, like an experienced man that he is, first repeats the position a couple of times to reach time control a little bit faster. Queen C8 check, King H7, Queen to F5 check, King G8, and only now does Chucky recapture on F4. Queen captures on F4, and now comes G5. Black is now trying to push the pass pawns as well. Well, that's not a pass pawn, but you know, still you do want to push them. Queen E5, Queen to B7, trying something, but it's not at all clear what you are trying. King to H7, Queen to F5 check, and now King to G7. We have A4, F6 now, and now A5. Ivanchuk simply keeps on pushing his pass pawn. That's the clearest way to victory. Queen to F7 with check, King moves. We have Queen to B7 back, and now King to A3. We have Queen to C7, but now A6. Queen to C6, attacking the pawn, but now A7. And now comes a series of checks. We have Queen to C1. Sorry about that. King to B3. Queen to D1 with check. Queen to C2 blocking. Now comes Queen to F3. And now Queen to C3. A lot of you probably had this happen to you a lot in your own games, especially in serious tournament games, where you sacrifice a piece, perhaps you have a very strong attack, perhaps even a winning attack, perhaps Petrosyan was considering that rook to C4 move, but then he didn't play it, he wanted to improve the position with queen captures on G2 a bit, and then his attack just evaporated. And now he wants to try everything, you know, to perhaps create something. Queen to E3, Queen to D5 check, King moves, Queen to C6, we have Queen to C5, Queen to F3 with check, King A4, King G6 now. Black is also making some progress. The Queen is preventing the pawn to be queened, as the Queen is guarding the A8 square, but it's very hard. Queen to C8, preparing pawn to A8. Now comes Queen to D1 with check, King B5, and now Queen to D5 with check. Bishop to C5, Queen B3 check, King C6, Queen to F3 check. So perhaps if Black can simply continue checking on the white king, maybe there could be, you know, a draw by perpetual checking, but it is very unlikely. King C7, we have Queen to D5. Now, at least if you bring a queen into the game, then you can capture on C5. But first, we have Queen to D8, Queen to A8 with check, and it was in this position that Manuel Petrosyan resigned the game. You can either go to the back rank, or you can go to F5, whichever you play. Let's say King H7, Queen D7 check, trades queens, and then the A pawn is winning. Or if you go to F5, it's the same idea. Queen D7 check, trades queens, and it's all over. Then A8 queen wins the game. So yeah, a very nice victory for Ivanchuk, who had a rough start to the tournament. Now this was round 8, and now I think he has 6.5 points out of 8, and he is tied for first with I think with Ernesto in Kiev and one more player, can't really remember. But I know that today he's playing against Ernesto in Kiev. You remember Ernesto in Kiev when he tried that double illegal move tactic against Magnus Carlsen in the World Blitz Championship. If you haven't seen that game, I do have a video on it, so you can check it out. It will be the first thing you see in the description below. Also a very nice game. But yeah, a very nice victory for Ivanchuk, and I'm very eager to see how his today's game will go. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank John Flynn, Darin Schnall, Mona Nurescu, John Mullen, and Sean Wilcoxon for their contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. With this contribution, Sean Wilcoxon once again joins the team as the top contributor. I think she donated already before last year's Christmas, becoming the top contributor. So very glad to see that you are enjoying the content, still enjoying the content. So yeah, once again, we can check out this very nice image of Bobby Fischer, myself, and the Medo. There you have it. Once again, as usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, hopefully with some more interesting content. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon.